Okay, here we go. Hi, y'all. I am here with my friend Alejandro Barreto, who I met in Newcastle many years ago in a Spanish meetup group. He's originally from Venezuela, and his background is in biotechnology, and he offers ecological advice for companies on how to make the best environmental and ecological decisions. And he has graciously agreed to talk to me today, so thank you so much. Alejandro, good to
No
see
worries, no
you.
worries. Yes, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah. What changed? What has changed for you in Newcastle since it's happened? You said you weren't going to the office at all anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Well, back in January, I was just basically doing Monday to Friday, when the days that I was in the office, Monday to Friday, driving to Newcastle, the usual stuff. And then when I was in the field, just going anywhere that I had to go within New South Wales.
Right.
Now, yeah, massive game changer. The company that I work for, they switch everything overnight. You got CEOs sending updates daily. You had like regional managers, adapting and communicating with people, and within our team, we were ready. We were like we were lucky because we had all the technology and tools to make this happen. We use software packages that allow us to sort of make this sort of work for home experience like a lot smoother.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's because it's an international company. Maybe you saw it coming a little bit, like you kind of predicted it. Yeah.
I think that's a big factor, and I think the leadership did quite well, and they saw the limitations and the restrictions, but they also saw the opportunities, and they went away with it.
And you were still able to go out in the field and stuff like that, which is cool. So you've been able to go out.
Which is, I'm glad you asked, because that was one of the restrictions and the constraints that we had, because obviously we normally go out in teams of two, minimum. So sometimes we have even more. So in this case, we actually had like to modify all our protocols. Safety protocols, travel protocols. We have to set up like travel plans and social distancing rules. And actually drive separate vehicles. So all these things had impacts, obviously, within the budget of the projects and all that. But there's no way that you can go around that. You just have to sort of
especially probably for a company like yours, where you're all about like doing things right and sticking to the rules and like doing things like by the books. Then you're not going to be cutting corners.
No. They were extremely careful and super cautious.
That's cool.
So it was hard, like the first couple of weeks, but after that, we know where we were standing. All the systems were in place, and it was fantastic.
Yeah,
to be honest, it's been a great experience.
Good. This is much more of a big picture thing, but I was reading about how Europe right now is putting in bike lanes through a lot of places, just because everything is slowing down. So they're looking at it as a unique opportunity. So I thought that might be something that you could hypothetically, your company might work on something like that. But what are they talking about from your professional perspective? Like, what do you think the future is with all these unknowns in terms of biotechnology?
Well, in terms of ecology, like, well, when you're talking about ecology, you have to talk about big picture as well, because that's how it works. It's about all the connections. So you're spot on. Like I think the biggest impact of COVID-19 in ecology is indirect, but is very important. Because during the whole pandemic and obviously during those really strict weeks in which whole countries were like in lockdown and industrial activity was like reduced to the minimum and all that kind of stuff, you had researchers working in the background, recording. So there's actually data that you can use, and I'm talking about air pollution. I'm talking about like threatened species sightings throughout the world.
What species sightings?
Threatened species.
Uh-huh.
Threatened species.
Okay.
So we're talking about like really rare or species that are
Threatened species.
almost.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
got you.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think that's a wealth of information that can be used later down the track to to basically show how our activity is impacting the environment.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned plants because you can measure all these things like in the rings of the trunks of trees. You know, you can see how fast they're growing. You can check the health of trees. You can check their growth. So you have all these biometrics that eventually someone is going to be using it just to say, hang on a minute, we have all this pace of activity, and that during these months we didn't. Which you never have that data if this thing did never happened. So that's a really
interesting
thing that out of it, you know.
Yeah. And because we couldn't make that happen. It's like you couldn't have asked for that type of phenomenon if you tried. I hope that there's people that are realizing that this is such a rare time that it should be, documented and recorded, and I hope that
absolutely. No, for sure. So I think that's probably the biggest thing in sort of in closer to home in terms of the ecology is probably not as sort of short-term beneficial, because what is going to happen is that the economy is going to start to hurt.
Yeah.
So the government is going potentially, hopefully not, but my guess is that the environmental sort of front is going to be relaxed a little bit too much in terms of approvals. Hopefully not. I'm hoping that this is not going to happen, especially in Australia. So, and that's something that to be seen, see what's going to happen in terms of project approvals, because now obviously jobs are going to be in the top priority, and the environment can be pushed back, because of the situation. I
hadn't thought about that much either, but that is one of the most frustrating things. Is it's almost like the economy doesn't always do amazing things for the environment, but if you don't have the economy, then you can't put the plans in place to try to make it go forward. It's just, they're all connected. They're all connected.
It's all connected. Yeah. I mean, hopefully, like, this is going to be a massive shakeup to the system. So it's going to be a rearrangement of how we operate and how we do business and how we tackle things.
A few people I know already have said that their companies, even when things like calm down, everyone's working from home now. And I was like, well, from a big picture, this is very minuscule, but at the same time, people not going to work, there's less cars on the roads, like they talk about, you know what I mean? Like
it sounds like a small thing. Like you say, oh yeah, people working from home, but when you add those numbers, it's gonna be a massitive reduction in fuel demand.
Well, there already is too.
There already is.
So I want to keep going, Alejandro, because I don't want to take too much of your time. And
no, go to the next question. Don't worry. If I'm talking too much, just go for it.
No.
No, I'm just kidding.
I love how much you talk. It's good. I just wanna. I also
maybe you have to edit this later.
No. Talk to me. So I wanted to. Speaking of oil, I guess I wanted to talk to you to talk to me a little bit more about your family in Venezuela, and most of your family's in Colombia.
Right
now, what is my brother was there, but he's now back in the States, and basically he was just inside all the time. He didn't know a huge amount about it. I read somewhere that they were having in Colombia days where women go out and days where men go out. What do you know about what's happening in South America?
It was quite interesting. As I said before, in Colombia they had a pretty good start. I think in Latin America, with a couple of exceptions, like probably Ecuador and Brazil and Mexico. They were like really hard, like smashed in the beginning, and they still are. But the rest of Latin America, they took measures really like quickly and efficiently, and people were really conscious and
Yeah.
they sort of they follow all the advice and everything. Initially, there was a few cases in Colombia. My family is specifically in Colombia. We were in Venezuela before, but due to the situation in Venezuela, they relocated to Colombia.
Yeah.
They're originally from Colombia anyway, so
Right.
it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
So, so in Colombia specifically, yes, that's right. They have all these measures, and they have like these alternate sort of days for gender based, you know. So if you were male and
Yeah.
female, so yeah, I know. And they had that in Panama as well. My sister is
Really?
in Panama. Yeah. They did that as well.
Do you know what? So it's like if it's on a Monday or a Wednesday or a Friday, who gets the fourth day?
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's
And do you know what
interesting.
their logic was behind that at all?
I think it's just to split
Yeah.
in groups.
Yeah.
They just wanted to split in groups and
have fewer people.
Yeah,
Right.
have fewer people. So they just sort of restricted, and they had fines and everything. So they did quite well. The problem that I noticing now is that they're not going to be able to maintain the lockdown conditions because of their economy. I mean, in Australia, we were really lucky because the government had like is wealthy, and they could basically keep people at home, just giving them money, and that's it. That's what people need. Just give them money, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
In Colombia, they did that, but they obviously don't have the resources to maintain it over a sustained period of time.
No.
So now people are just being forced to
they don't have any more money to give them.
No, that's right. And the government is like, well, we need to start to sort of reactivate the economy, because they're being forced to reactivate the economy, and people is just basically, you have to go out, otherwise you're not gonna eat.
Right.
So it's a really tough reality that the whole world is facing. Like most of the world is facing.
And it's not just in Colombia either, and I think in parts of the States and
that's right.
And also I do think population plays a role. Like Colombia is a very, very populated country. There's a lot of people, and that makes me nervous too, because it's also easier to spread when people live close to one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously the lower the socioeconomic status, the less likely is that they're going to follow any of the rules. And even, to be honest, even like whatever socioeconomic status you are, I think it's extremely difficult, when you sort of when you open up restrictions, and you're in a restaurant, and you're or you're inviting people over from your like in your place, it's the likelihood of if someone has the virus, it's highly likely that it's going to be transmitted.
Yeah, I know. I know, and I'm so worried about it. And
sorry.
No. It's interesting, and it's sad, and it's important to talk about. And I wanted you. But one thing I wanted. So we were talking on the phone the other night, and we were talking about You said something funny. You said in some ways Venezuela has been on lockdown for the last.
Oh yeah, that's right. We were talking about it. Yeah. So basically, when the whole thing started, Venezuela is one of the countries that have probably less COVID-related cases.
Yeah.
And I think the type of government that you have can probably influence, how you sort of respond to this crisis.
Yes.
In Venezuela specifically, Venezuela is a basket case, but basically, in a nutshell, Venezuela has been in a lockdown for years, for economic reasons,
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because, like, when I was there, and I've heard Colombians tell me about it, how so many Venezuelans were migrating to Colombia just in the past few years because things have gotten so bad. But now I'm hearing that some of them are going back.
That's right, because there's no economic activity in the countries that they migrated to, and because the governments in those countries are not helping them.
No,
they just because they have very limited resources, you know, like in Colombia, for example, they have like 2 million Venezuelans. That this is the official numbers, 2 million. So imagine just, you know, you need to give like additional handouts for 2 million people. So it's pretty brutal in your coffers, you know, like your treasury is gonna get hurt. So most of the Latin American countries that they were, like in Chile, Peru, Ecuador, they turn their backs on them. So they have to go. They had no choice. They will starve in those countries.
And then they're in Venezuela, and I guess Venezuela isn't helping them any more than Colombia.
Venezuela is doing what they can, you know, like they're basically giving them handouts the way they can, and you know, they're going back to their, you know, families and whatever, and they're doing what they can. Obviously, it's a pretty crazy situation.
But I do wonder, and we were talking about this earlier, I think this is an interesting thing. So would you call Venezuela a dictatorship at this
stage? Absolutely. Yes. Back to your point. Back to your point. Definitely. I think authoritarian governments like China, Russia could have done it, but they didn't. but I think I think there's a couple of elements here. I think there's like the type of government, and like how authoritarian it is, but also there's a cultural element as well. So and specifically, for example, China, China, South Korea, Japan, you know, those countries have been doing really well since the beginning of the pandemic, and they have few things in common. You know, they probably in terms of the government type, probably not as much, but culturally they're very similar. You know, they think about the common good more than they're less individualistic than Americans or Western societies. So they're thinking about the big picture all the time. And that's one element. The other element is obviously specifically when you talk about China, is like they're an authoritarian government which can turn things over really quickly. For example, building a hospital in 10 days. Boom. You know, or basically having a new rules across the board, across the whole country, and you are going to enforce it. That's it. Boom. It just happens overnight. No one's gonna be complaining. There's not gonna be riots. No, that's it. So I think they have an advantage. These type of societies have an advantage over like more sort of democratic societies in which people is always being sort of one of our core values is, you know, always question, you know, the authority, always, you know, think about your individual needs over the others. So all these things are affecting us now,
which is so interesting, because it's like, what is the cost? Like in most cases, we love so much, Westerners love their free lifestyle, but what is the cost of that if we cannot, you know, if in a situation like this where your decisions impact others, and you're not used to thinking about that the way perhaps some Asian countries are. And they've also had more pandemic scares. I think there have been like a few other things in the past few years that have encouraged. The reason I think they also wear a lot of masks as well. So there's a lot of different factors, and it's almost impossible to compare different countries. Like sometimes I think, why am I even asking? Because it's hard. But I do think
it is really hard.
It is, but it's also like when we come out of this, it will be so interesting to see the countries that have done the best. I'm really interested. I'm hoping to talk to a friend from Sweden as well, because evidently they have done okay, not great, but they haven't locked down people. But then,
that's interesting. I think this situation is being sort of obviously forcing the whole world to sort of operate in a certain way, and I think at the same time it's just speeding things up. I think it's just it's like you putting like a fast forward, putting history in fast forward, if that makes sense. Because you know you obviously have current global trends, you know, like things are happening, things that you know, the projections, you know, about countries, you know, increasing their influence and countries declining a little bit. And I think this situation is just speeding things up. Because it's just been forcing people to, or even governments to operate in a certain way.
Well, it's one of those things. By not acting, you're making a decision.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, Alejandro, but thank you so much for talking to me this evening. You have a lot of interesting insights, sharing your story.
My pleasure.
Yeah, really